Pussycat. A while ago I did a video, I did two videos, and it was on this book, Armchair Prepper Reads, and the first video disappeared, so the second video I put out at 4 times normal speed, which is probably the way I should put all of these out. Anyway, it started a bit of a trend. I noticed Daniel did it, so anyway, if you have a lot to say and you don't think people should listen to it, put it out 4 times the speed. Anyway, this was a decent book that I reviewed and read, and I'm going to share it with you. You may or may not want to get a copy. It's according to the New York Times, if you trust their opinions, this is a chillingly realistic work of science fiction. It's a short book. It is Japanese. I don't read Japanese very well, so I got an English translation. And the translation is a little rough in parts, but I think it captures the spirit both of Japan and Japan's culture, which is an important part of my review of this, as well as an event that probably most people haven't really thought about. We know, if we accept science, that the Earth has tectonic plates, and the land that we take for granted is continually being subsumed back into the magma and melted again and being spewed out and then coalescing into a solid form again, and that is actually the Earth, and the planet that we actually stand on is actually on top of this huge ball of melted stuff, magma, and what is now solid will over geological time be magma again. So the book takes place in Japan. The protagonists are very Japanese, and it basically postulates that over a period of a year or so, all of the islands of Japan slide back into the magma, disappear, sink. Hence the title from Sakio Komatsu, Japan Sinks. That would be an shtf event if you lived in Japan. It'd be fascinating for us, it'd be wall-to-wall coverage. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing, so I'm going to pluck out some prepping stuff. The entire ocean floor in this area in a mere 2.5 days has sunk more than 500 feet. Ooh, what's going on here, you think? And then the book goes on, and it just goes on a journey, and there's various mad scientists and angry scientists, and the government gets involved, and rich people, and they decide to deal with this in the only way they can, which is to evacuate the entire islands of Japan. Literally over 100 million people. And it's interesting. There are, as I said, it's a translation and there's some errors in it, some Canadian content errors. Here the protagonist is trying to talk his brother into taking a job abroad. You can't actually tell him, by the way, if you stay here you're going to die in a year. But it's kind of fun because it kind of gets it slightly wrong. You talked about changing jobs. What would you do? Asked Antonera, looking down morosely at the scene below. Well, there's no need to worry about taking care of mother anymore. And so what I've been thinking about is work in Canada. Best country in the world. His brother's voice had a trace of sadness in it. Canada's great. There's a development underway in the oil fields of Manitoba. I've been intending to take the family and go, but my wife is not enthusiastic. Now, there is a little bit of oil in Manitoba, but I think they really meant Alberta, which is kind of amusing. Again, for the Canadian bit, brother, go to Canada, that's the best thing, he said once again, his voice ringing further. Believe me, it is the best thing. It is. Prepare for shtf now, come to Canada and live up here. Nice. Bit cold, but nice. So when they've done all the calculations, and the scientists and the government and the industrialists have all got together, they've bought and they're building deep ocean submarines to actually see what the heck's going on, because some islands have disappeared and there's lots of earthquakes starting to happen. They find out something that's kind of scary, and I think this is an interesting one. 11,200 hours, Yukiyama muttered. Why, that's a year and 3 months, I believe. So Japan will be under the ocean in a year and 3 months. Now I think for an educational scenario, what if scenario for preppers, let's reverse that a little bit. If today you found out that in a year and 3 months from today, your country would be under 80 foot of ash, or would go underneath the ocean, would be eradicated. The landmass, all of the landmass of your country is eradicated in 1 year, 3 months from today, what would you do? Which other countries would you bug out to? How much stuff could you take with you? And how would you get there? And how would you be accepted there? And what type of life would you create there? I haven't really done too much thought on that. It's kind of an interesting one. As ever, the government tries to keep this secret, because governments do that. They don't want to frighten people, because, you know, we the people are dumber than bricks. And they, the government, don't really like to share power. And information is the ultimate power. And that's happened already, is that our industrial assets are beginning the flight abroad without anyone knowing about it. And with regards to the plans for evacuation, what I want to know is this: is the saving of the life of every citizen of Japan the thing that is given priority above all else, or isn't it? Mr. Prime Minister, before a non-partisan group looks into the matter, I would like to hear from you regarding this point. Let this be understood. Our overriding intent is to save the lives of the entire Japanese people, making no exceptions whatsoever, answered the Prime Minister. To accomplish this after making use of every means at our disposal. However, what about after the disaster? How are 110 million people going to live on then? How are 110 million people going to live from then on? The government is obliged to face up to this problem too. And again, I think it's a block for a lot of preppers. It's the year or two afterwards that people might be considering a romantic version of their lives in SHTF. About 20 years later, when you've bugged out with your inch bag to the woods, presuming you can hunt and forage and survive, and I think most of you can't, and you don't get shot by another person who's bugged out, got no food, what are you going to do? Like, where are you going to live? How are you going to live? What job are you going to do? How are you going to occupy your time? Interesting, how are you going to fit in to somebody else's culture, somebody else's community? Most preppers online seem to think that everybody else has to fit into their version of reality, but maybe not. Now this is interesting, it's culture, right? The Japanese archipelago would sink within a year. The government's announcement shocked the world, but the reaction in Japan itself was strangely calm. Though it might be more accurate to say that news had plunged the Japanese into an enervated, ominous silence. There were those who ran outside screaming, but such cases were extremely rare. As he listened to the Prime Minister's address, a hard, blank expression came over people's faces. When the broadcast had ended, the only show of emotion was, for the most part, a faint sigh. It may have been the news was so fantastic that for the moment, everyone was at a loss how to respond to it. I think that's culturally specific. I'm not altogether sure if Canada would take the news that a large asteroid was about to smack into Manitoba and destroy the oil fields, and that would wipe out all life on Canada and most of North America, but wouldn't destroy the planet, wouldn't destroy the societies elsewhere like in China. I'm not altogether sure people in Canada would react with stoicism. I think a lot of us would be running outside screaming. People walked rapidly, spurred by the fear of being hit by hard chunks of ash falling from the sky. This is an evolving SHTF. Lots of volcanoes, lots of earthquakes, and they get more and more violent. Taxis raced by at reckless speed as though unwilling to stop to pick anyone up. The drivers were transformed as they listened to their radios, from men at work to fearful individuals with one thought on their minds: to get home to their families as quickly as possible. Home. It was as though the people of this great city were crying out with a single voice as they hurried along through the rain of grey-brown ash. To get home. And then what? What could be done? Though this was the thought that loomed up dimly in the heart of everyone, no one confronted it. For now, what had to be done was get back to one's family. After that, there would be time to think what to do. And I think that's why preppers need to embrace the events of possible SHTF and plan for them and mitigate them, but also think about post-disaster survival and community. under situations of great stress, we become very tunnel vision. Physically, our field of vision collapses and our hearing collapses and our thought processes contract back to the lizard times. And all we can think about is the single goal: get home, get home. Decent preppers need to think about how they're going to actually manage massive sudden stress from an SHTF event in ways that allow them to have the flexibility and extra additional brain power to actually cope beyond the actual iconic event itself and what they need to do. So I think that's important. And as Rocky from pointed out in the best prepping video of 2017, getting home is an overwhelming desire that the entire population is almost likely to experience in a sudden SHTF. So as a prepper, you're going to experience that desire as well. So how are you going to get home if you go home will be very much affected by everybody else's responses. So if you like science fiction and you like pot-boiling science fiction, it's a little staid and it's a little obvious in the outcome, though there are a few surprises. I do recommend it. I enjoyed it. I would say it's about 3.5 out of 5 as fiction, and probably a 3 or a 4 for Apocalypse. Different take on an apocalypse, one country only, and the country's going to disappear. So yeah, go to the library, get a copy. Japan sinks. I enjoyed it. Au revoir.